Welcome back, everyone. In this video, I've got a brand new lens from Hasselblad that I want to share with you. This is the brand new 20-35E zoom lens. So this is now the second zoom lens that Hasselblad has made for the XCD system, and it is the very first wide-angle zoom. Oh, and the E stands for exclusive. So this is a brand new concept lineup for Hasselblad, and Hasselblad defined this as signifying high optical performance, delivering edge-to-edge, high-end image quality. Hasselblad's E-series holds no bars and will be the flagship lenses in the lineup. And the 20-35E is the first lens in this series. So the next question you're probably wanting to ask is, does it deliver? Oh my. All right, so how much detail and sharpness are we talking about here? Let's look at an image. This was an image that was taken in New York City. This is in the Bowery, just above Chinatown. We are facing east. You can see a lot of detail in here, but what you probably can't make out are the three people on top of this roof here. And if I zoom in, you're gonna see not only are there three people on top of this roof, you can make out the two guys working on top of this roof over here. This is a lot of detail when we are zoomed in. So it's one thing to look at a lens in the center of the image. Let's check out a corner here. If we go down here to this rooftop, you can see all the bottles and junk on this table over here. We can also make out the fake owl that is sitting on top of this satellite here to keep the birds away. You can see all the detail in the street. This is very sharp, and you can tell that it maintains an enormous amount of clarity and sharpness and fidelity when we go out to the corners of the image. So this one is at 20 millimeters. This is a zoom lens, and it goes all the way out to 35. Let's look at it at 35. If we go to 35, let's check out our people on the rooftop again. If we zoom way in, we can see that they are in fact still there, and we can get a better idea of these two guys working on the top of this roof over here. And even if we look at corner sharpness, let's go down to the bottom right hand of this image, but you wouldn't think you could read street signs. Well, if I zoom all the way in, I can see very clearly this is Forsyth Street. I can read all of the signs on the building. This is a very sharp lens. So we're going to get into overanalyzing and pixel peeping some images in just a second, but I do want to say that at every focal length across the entire range, edge-to-edge sharpness, this lens is absolutely incredible. But first, let's talk about the lens itself. So the design on this lens is quite interesting. It features both internal focusing as well as internal zoom, so you don't see anything move as you're using it. It's extremely well built, much in the style of the newer Hasselblad lenses that we've seen over the last 2 years. It is a 20-35 millimeter focal length, so this is a 16 to 28-ish equivalence. The minimum focus distance is 0.32 meters, which is very close. The lens features 16 elements in 12 groups, and there are 3 aspherical and 4 extra low dispersion elements. The lens features a leaf shutter system, allowing flash sync at all shutter speeds all the way up to 1/2000th of a second. One thing that I think is really interesting with the whole concept of this E-series is that lens design is always a series of trade-offs. So at a certain price point, what can you deliver? How well can you deliver it? And of course, the E-series being exclusive, this is the high end. So this is going to be no holds barred. And typically when we think of lens design like that, we think of really big lenses. And I actually would argue that Hasselblad did a really good job with the ergonomics on this lens. Yes, it is bigger than the primes. You would expect that. It is a little bit heavier, but it's not too cumbersome. And I think they've kept this size really good. In fact, the filter threading on here is actually a 77 millimeter filter threading, so it's not much bigger than what we're seeing on the zoom lenses. I think they've done a wonderful job, especially with the internal focusing as well as zoom functions. This is a very well thought out lens design. So for those keeping score, the lens comes in at a weight of 805 grams. And of course, this lens is compatible with all of the XCD cameras. So this is the X2D as well as the original X1D, the X1D Mark II, as well as the 907X cameras with both the 50 megapixel and 100 megapixel backs. At its widest setting, it's just a few degrees wider than the 21 millimeter prime that was in the original lineup for this camera. So technically this is the widest lens in Hasselblad's lineup. And of course, when looking at resolution and sharpness rendering, this lens is really essential to landscape and architectural photography. The image quality is absolutely outstanding. All right, so I want to look at some image samples so we can point a few things out that are really impressive about the design on this lens. So first of all, with an ultra wide angle like this, it's really good at photographing tight architectural spaces. So this is a hotel room that I had in New York City a little while back, and this was just shot, the bed takes up the entire width of the room here. But the first thing that I want to point out on here is how well this lens handles distortion. So typically this is something that's very difficult when you design with wider angle lenses. This image was taken at 20 millimeters, so this is the widest focal length on the lens, and you can see that the lines are pretty straight. And I'm pointing this out because a lot of times when I get lenses for previewing, this is before they're released, so there are no lens adjustments in Lightroom. There's no lens profiles that you can select to correct certain things. So vignetting and distortion typically are left uncorrected. Now, having said that, the reason I'm pointing this out is that a lot of manufacturers now rely on post-processing software to correct things like distortion. Some companies absolutely get away with murder on this, but you can see all the lines are straight here. There is a little bit of distortion that could be corrected, but this is really close. And why is this important? Because this is going to maintain sharpness and image fidelity if you're not having to bend the image to correct image distortion on here. So that's one thing I'm very impressed with, and that speaks volumes to how good the lens designers at Hasselblad are. And of course, you never get sick of this. With a 100 megapixel lens, I can zoom all the way out, and it's sharp clear to the distance here, and we can see every detail in the landscape. I'll go back in, you can see how small that is. So there is an enormous amount of resolution that you get out of these cameras, and it's really fun to be able to do this as a party trick. But anyway, the image quality is fantastic. Back to the design on this lens, this is really impressive because with a medium format sensor, it's bigger than 35 millimeters. So you would expect, with having to have more coverage, that the lens would be much bigger than what you would find on 35 millimeter, and it's really not. It's very compact and it fits right in the range. A couple more images I want to share with you. This is one of my favorite images that I took on here, and I think environmental portraits are a really cool possibility with wide-angle lenses. This was taken at the Modern, which is the Contemporary Art Museum here in Fort Worth. This is the docent waiting for the door to open early in the morning. Now, I did crop this image to tighten it up a little bit, but still, if we zoom in, you can see that we still maintain an enormous amount of image quality. Kind of makes me wonder if we're not being forward-thinking with this lens design to support higher megapixel counts one day. Remains to be seen, but it is very sharp. Which brings me to another point that I want to make about medium format and cropping. So when we think back to the film days, 35 millimeter being the standard, it was very difficult to crop because you could only enlarge that small negative space so much before you would start losing image quality and the grain would become too big. And so that's where medium format came in, and Hasselblad obviously comes from that tradition. When you got into magazine publishing, it also gave the art director a little bit of freedom in terms of maybe we wanted to crop something out or we wanted to move things around. And I think that it's a little bit different now, but it's still the same concept. And when we consider Hasselblad and the idea of medium format, especially with 100 megapixels, and as I was showing you earlier with that image with the window out of the hotel room, if this is my image here, and obviously I took this just for display here, that took this down a rather long hallway, we have a lot of information. I probably would want to crop, and most people would think with, you know, lower megapixel count, this would be a little too extreme. But if I zoom in, you can see that we still maintain a lot of detail and a lot of fidelity in here. I'll show you another image. Many of you know my friend Hugh, who joined me that day, and if I zoom in on Hugh, he's got really awesome hair, which is very detailed at 100 megapixels. Now, I also want to mention minimum focus distance. So it is rather close with this lens. It is 32 centimeters, and as you can see in a shot like this, I can zoom in, and you can almost crop into macro-like detail on here, which is crazy with an ultra-wide angle like this. You can also see when I zoom back out that it does give you some bokeh in here, which is actually really nice. I don't think these are really the strengths of the intended use on this lens, but something that is worth mentioning, with an aperture of f3.2, this is a very wide aperture, especially for medium format. This gives you an equivalent roughly to a 16 millimeter f2.5, which is very unusual for a zoom lens. This makes low light photography and night photography very easy, especially when you're using, let's say, the X2D, which has in-body image stabilization. It enables a lot of things that you can do without using a tripod. So we've seen the image quality. Let's talk a little bit about ergonomics. The 20 to 35E is very solid feeling. As I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of glass elements in here that does contribute to the weight. I don't think it's too heavy though. I think it is designed with a lot of intention towards ergonomics. Nothing feels plasticky. It's very solid, very minimal. It has a very timeless design. You do get the nameplate branding with the old school logo as we saw with the V lenses. And it's also got the H logo as the grip pattern for both the focus and zoom rings. It's actually very interesting. When Hasselblad mentioned they were going to send me this lens and what it was, I expected it to be a lot bigger and a lot heavier. If you're used to old school medium format, that's the kind of the way that it was for a long time. I think that the designers have taken advantage of all of the advances that we have in lens design right now, and they've designed something that is very ergonomic, very comfortable, and has the highest quality that you would expect out of something like this. It is really impressive. All right, so where does the 20 to 35E stand in the current Hasselblad lineup? All right, so this is the first of the E series lenses. E standing for exclusive. It is the flagship, the top of the line, the creme de la creme. It is highest optical quality possible. It also comes in at a very high price. When you consider actually that you're replacing several prime lenses with one zoom lens and that quality maintains itself throughout the focal range, I don't think the price seems as high as it would initially. Now, having said that, you could use those prime choices as alternatives. So we've got the P series of lenses, P standing for portable. We also have the V series of lenses, V stands for versatile. And then we also have the original lenses that Hasselblad initially launched with the X1D and the X1D Mark II. One lens that comes to mind is the older 21mm. And I want to clarify something on here because every time I bring up that lens, I talk about how far we've come in terms of image quality, and a lot of people say, well, yeah, he doesn't like that lens. That is not true. I do like that lens. That lens is outstanding. I just think that we've come a long way. The 21mm is really cool. This actually gives you just a hair wider field of view than the 21, not much. It goes down to 20, but that would be an alternative for something like this. I think another alternative might be the 25V or even the 38V. Both of those are the versatile lens lineup. They're extraordinarily good. They come in at a much lower price point, and you can't go wrong with either one of those. And finally, another alternative is the 28P. The 28P is really cool because of the size. It is an f4, but it is a prime lens, so it is designed with a very small footprint, and it's a great lens. In fact, I will say I have experience with all of the lenses in Hasselblad's lineup, and there really aren't any bad lenses. You can't go wrong with any of these. They are all quite good. And as somebody who owned and still owns the original X1D, it's been really interesting to see how this system has evolved through the years, through all the lenses, through all the changes that they've done. And we're at a point right now where Hasselblad has a very mature lineup, especially on the wide end of things, and there are a lot of choices. And it makes me really excited to think about what Hasselblad might have on the design table for future lenses. So I would love to know what you guys think, so drop me a comment below. I will see you guys in the next video. Until then, later.